So before you guys start wondering who's this guy who seems like a college-going kid and what is he doing up here, let me quickly explain to you what the intent is or what my motive of being here is. Okay, so most of what I wanted to talk about today has been covered by Mr. Sunil More, which is great because that just shows that we are already working towards something that we truly believe in. We may not be able to put it into action as much, but we are all striving towards the same thing, which is safety. What I'm going to be talking about specifically is event safety, and in event safety, I'm going to be talking about something that relates to ropes and pulleys and working at height. There are a lot of other subjects to be spoken about when it comes to safety, which a lot of you are already experts at, you have a lot of experience in, but I'm going to be trying to sort of stay within the bounds of everything to do with climbing, working at height, and ropes and pulleys. Because at the end of the day, those are the things that create a certain amount of large impact. And I'm going to be talking about a few experiences that have happened to me and to organizations that we've worked with recently that have impacted us in a very big way. Okay, everyone with me so far? Yes? Great, thank you. Okay, so over the next few minutes, what I plan to talk about is the increasing infusion of specialized rigging into events. What that means essentially is whether you see people flying on stage doing zip lines for entries, whether you see large decor elements being hung off grids of auditoriums, those are the kind of things that I'm talking about. Specialized rigs, anything that is flown, anything that is suspended. What we are trying to do constantly trying to do is push the envelope. And the reason why we are doing this is because we're constantly seeking to give or deliver new experiences. And new being the operative word here, because most often than not, what we hear is, kuch naya karna chahiye. And what that naya usually translates to is pushing our own boundaries. So whether we look at it in a conventional sense, saying that, hey, I'm an adventurer, I'm a mountaineer, and therefore adventure is one angle, what I like to say or what I like to think is we're constantly like to push our own boundaries and make sure that we are being as adventurous as possible so that we can give these experiences to our clients, to our end clients. A bit about myself. So as I was introduced, essentially my journey started out as being a kid trying to figure things out in the great world of outdoors. I did my first high altitude Himalayan trek when I was 11 years old. And that got me thinking, saying this is something to be explored, and slowly that became my profession after going through a few academic rounds of a diploma in glacier mountaineering, multiple adventure courses, skiing courses, rafting courses, and so on and so forth, all vocational. The two key things that I'd like to mention here, which I think will set the precedent here, is the National Outdoor Leadership School. It's an American school that runs courses all across the world, one of them that happens in India. This is a course that teaches you outdoor leadership through adventure activities. So what is happening essentially on a course is that you're learning risk management through an activity like rock climbing or rappelling or rafting or so on and so forth. The other organization that I belong to, or I did belong to, is an organization called Outward Bound. Now this is an organization that teaches people how to be in the outdoors and experience it safely. So how do you create large groups of people going into the wilderness, creating a safe environment, bringing them back, and then making them feel good about it versus getting into that zone of discomfort. I started Natura in the year 2006 with the intent that we are going to be able to run adventure-based experiential learning programs. But we soon realized that adventure-based experiential learning programs simply meant corporate outbound training programs is something that everyone else was doing. What we also got into at that point of time was getting people to start flying on stage, because one of my friends, Terence Lewis, said, hey, listen, if you can make me do rock climbing, is it possible for you to make me fly on stage? And this was in 2006, where we were still mountaineers. We like to think, we thought we were the kind of people who like to spend more time in the mountains than on stage. And we said, yeah, sure, we could give it a shot, and we started experimenting with ropes and pulleys. While we were doing this, what we also realized is every time we started doing anything with ropes and pulleys and making people fly or lift off the ground, we started wondering what we are doing. Is it frivolous? Is it unsafe? Is this something that is going to cause grievous injuries to anyone who's experiencing it? And that got our mountaineering minds to start becoming a little more paranoid, extremely anal, and start getting into the nitty-gritties of it. 2006 is when we did our first big show. We actually flew Priyanka Chopra on stage for this show called Nokia New Year's Eve. And that began the journey for us going into the whole zone of aerial rigging and flying effects. Now, while this was happening, one of the things that we kept thinking about is, sure, so we essentially like playing with ropes and pulleys. We like playing with trusses. We like playing with things that are very Lego-ish. So we came up with this maxim called responsible play, saying we like playing, but it doesn't go well if there is no responsible attached to it. So it's very easy to make people fly. It's very easy to go climbing. It's very easy to go rafting. But if you're not doing it right, and if you're not creating a safe enough environment, if you're not making sure that everyone around you, including your environment, is kept safe, then it's just not responsible. Responsible play as a word, as a term itself, might sound like a very cheesy condom ad, but essentially that is something that we truly believe in. And the reason why that happens is because what we realized was that the reason why we were in Natura together was because we love to play. And the inherent need for safety through responsible play made us feel like this combination of Batman meets Cirque du Soleil meets these paramedics. We thought we were really cool when we thought of all of this. But the challenge was, how do we get this into action? How do we make sure that we are creating these experiences for people, and yet make sure that we ourselves don't feel that we are being sellouts. We ourselves don't feel that we are being frivolous. Now, you may have started to wonder, what has all of this got to do with this particular expo? I mean, it's talking about outdoors, it's talking about mountaineering, it's talking about everything that's out there. There's nothing in here, there's nothing urban. Now, here is how I think it connects. Adventure and outdoors has this one common thing, which is the need to try on something new, the need to feel a certain sense of achievement, which I feel when it comes to designing events, exhibitions, and celebrations, it's all the same thing. We're constantly trying to create unique experiences for our people, for our clients, for our vendors. Now the question is, why do we want to do these crazy things? Why do we want to suspend cars up buildings? Why do we want to fly people from the audience to stage? Why do we want to have massive projection screens rigged up, showing really wonderful images and making people feel awed? We also need to talk about the needs of the live media industry, ranging from incident logging systems, learning sharing forums, to creation of an independent safety auditing team and procedure where IESA as an association can play the biggest role as a regulatory body. This is something that Mr. Sunil More just touched upon, and I just mentioned to Sanjay, saying that most of this is being covered here and it's extremely pertinent. Just to give you a quick background, a week ago, I met in Sabas's office, and we essentially discussed of putting down a few guidelines that can be used very easily, very easily implemented, rather than getting into this extremely gyan zone where you have a huge manual that is set out for every event manager and exhibition planner to follow. Now, the reason why I'm mentioning OSHA is something because I don't know if a lot of you have heard, there was a massive accident that happened with Cirque du Soleil. It's one of the biggest, largest circuses, performing units around the world, and they had a massive accident in the US. And OSHA, which is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, is the one that was investigating it. Now, of course, that's a government body. The intent is, my intent of saying this is, can we look at, is there a way of exploring the possibility that us as associations can look at small teams, whether they are audit teams, whether they are safety committees, whether they are smaller teams who are either looking at consulting with larger events or looking at incident logging systems so that at least there's a certain amount of learning sharing that is happening. So, why do all of this? What is the need of creating these bodies? Well, here is some of the here is how some of these accidents have directly affected us as an organization, us as Natura, and therefore everyone else who was around it. Please note that these examples are not to point fingers at individuals or organizations, but are essentially meant to talk about how incidents and accidents have affected us in general. And if it has affected us, I'm sure it can affect you, it can affect a lot of other people. So, just to give you a brief background, as I started, I said I used to run adventure-based experiential programs. One of these programs was for an organization where we were running these adventure programs where there was a zip line happening from 100 feet. Now, one day while we were on one of our programs, we received a call from the HR stating all future contracts, all future programs have been cancelled because another organization running a similar program with Department B had an accident. That accident resulted in a person ziplining from one end to another. There was no backup rope. So therefore, when the rope snapped, the person fell down. It was a fatal fall. That obviously ruined that person's life. The family was distraught. The programs were stopped. We were affected by it. All our contracts were affected by it. All our vendors were affected by it. Similar such incidents kept happening with us over the course of time. All of you must have heard about the CWG incident. It is something that was extremely unfortunate, where a goalpost truss actually fell on an official. Now that's something that affected us greatly because we were sitting in one of the agency's office trying to design the Queen's Batons ceremony where we were supposed to do this massive aerial act. And we get a call saying, nothing to do with aerial, we don't want to deal with trusses anymore. Those are the kind of incidences that we've come across and have really shaken us, saying that if something can happen around us and it is costing us not just money, but the fact that our future is at stake, we need to do something about it. We were supposed to do a bungee jumping event in Mumbai, and just before that, there was an incident in Bangalore which resulted in a fatality, where the bungee jumping participant actually plummeted down on the ground, his harness broke, there was no safety net, and he died. Obviously, bungee became this taboo word saying that bungee kuch nahi karna hai. We can't do anything related to it, and there was a temporary ban on it by the government of Karnataka because it happened in Bangalore. There have been multiple videos, I'm sure you've seen floating around, of trusses having collapsed on people. The recent one that I remember seeing is these bunch of kids on stage doing a school program, and this whole goalpost truss collapses on them. And you wonder what is going to happen after that, because I haven't really gotten the information of the kind of injuries, the kind of consequences there were, but it's the most horrific visual to see a bunch of 15, 16 kids being squashed under a goalpost truss falling down. These kind of incidents have continued to happen. These are just a few incidents that I'm talking about where they have directly resulted in us losing a contract or us not being able to execute a concept because something has happened in the recent past. And the last one that I'd like to talk about is the reason why I was actually doing a safety talk similar to this 2 years ago at EMA is when we were doing an event, we were supposed to do an aerial act with the Terence Lewis team. There was another aerial rigging company who also does special effects and pyros who had 2 people rigged on a crane. Now, unfortunately, one of the systems on the crane failed. These 2 aerialists came plummeting down on stage one of the aerialists broke her hip girdle. It takes a certain massive amount of trauma to break such a big bone. So 60 feet of fall on stage in the middle of the show, she breaks her hip girdle, she's whisked away. And that's how the event manager said, listen, this is just not done and we need to do something about it. And that's how I ended up talking about it for the first time in 2013. My intent has been very simple. Constantly keep pushing these incidences to people who matter. Those are you, because you're constantly hearing about it. You guys are experiencing it. A lot of things can be controlled. They can be controlled by doing something very, very simple, which is what I'm going to come to very quickly. Before we get into that, one of the things that I'd like to look at is what are the sort of consequences that happen. Mishaps, consequences, there's a trauma to family, there's a massive impact on the industry, there's closures of events, contracts, use of anything specialized. There's also a possible ban by the government. One of the things that has recently again happened is, I don't know if some of you have read about it recently in the newspaper, there was a death, 14 people died when a picnic was taken to a beach in Alibag or somewhere around that in Mumbai, where the government post that has said that all picnics to hills, riverbanks, beaches should be banned for schools, colleges, and similar such educations, because it's the easiest thing to do. It's easier to sort of clamp down on activities rather than come up with guidelines that are going to make sure that people adhere to it. And that's a scary thought, because that means that whatever that we are doing to enhance our experience is at stake. So which means if you're doing something that is crazy cool, that is being hung off the grid, if you're going to be flying people, if you're going to be flying cars to enhance the experience, all of that is going to go away, because the government one day is going to wake up, take cognizance and say that this is not happening, we're going to ban this all. So finally, this leads me to a few key messages, and a lot of it I think is already been covered. I just like to reiterate on a few things that are pertinent, I feel. I think there is a need to acknowledge the need to infuse special effects and aerial rigging into events in a very, very systematic and responsible way. Anything to do with working above 3 to 4 meters of height requires a certain amount of diligence. It requires a certain amount of being present there, being responsible, because everything is about defying gravity, whether you're hanging things or whether you are climbing yourself. We definitely need to run professional workshops for exhibition managers on risk and safety management systems. We should try and create anonymous incident logging systems through a website like IESA, which is what Mr. More talked about too. We should make sure that we start creating job safety analysis reports and create an awards category for rewarding agencies on safety and safe and securely managed events. Again, this is a point that Mr. More spoke about. I'm just going to run through a few things that are pertinent because we are running short on time. We clearly need to stay away from something as simple as jugaad and chalta hai phrase. This is something that keeps popping up again and again in our industry. We need to include risk and safety management as an experiential learning subject in event management courses, so that event managers are armed with this rather than just relying on vendors to say, acha ye karna chahiye, ye nahi karna chahiye. So these do's and don'ts are coming from the event managers and event planners versus just relying on the vendors to know what is right and wrong. Now, these are the few actionable points that we are hoping to push, and the intent is for every association that we are able to meet to be able to start implementing this. These are simple things. These are not very complicated. So something as simple as anyone who's working at height of more than 2 meters above ground needs to wear a climbing helmet, a harness, and a safety shoe. It's easier to implement this than create a massive manual which has a gazillion things listed down and say, implement this. It's not very easy. The hope is to start with something simple. So whether it's working at height, whether it's high impact construction sites, whether it's electrical and fire, simple things. So no open sockets, all electrical fixtures should have earthing, 3-core wiring, and so on and so forth. The list goes on. I have just presented something that is as an example, and that needs to start as, the hope is for it to start as a stepping stone. The hope is currently to work on a small set of guidelines that can be implemented very quickly, that we can have a buy-in of all the top players in the country saying, we take a pledge to take this on. We will implement this on our own end. And only then will we gain a certain amount of momentum. Because till then, what will happen is we will continue just talking about it, presenting it, but there'll be no action. So thank you.